Self-care isn't about creating a moment to escape from your life. It's about building a life we don't have to escape from. Hi, friend, and welcome back to Torches, Yoga, and Mindfulness. I'm Lauren, and I'll be your coach. And today, I want to talk about what true self-care is and what it can look like in our different lives. I was fortunate to recently have been interviewed by Bold Journey magazine, and we got to talk about my experiences and how intentionally planning self-care into my day-to-day routines has been monumental to me achieving my goals and showing up as my best self for my family, friends, and myself. So I wanted to share some of that with you today and why it is so important for us, and it's not a luxury to practice self-care. True self-care isn't about pampering yourself. It's about how you choose to move through your day. It doesn't have to be extra things for you to do or time away that makes the work pile up. Sometimes self-care, like our mindful living practices, are just a shift, just a different approach to how we already do things, like the decisions we make or how we treat ourselves. When we neglect self-care, anxiety, boredom, and burnout, stress, they all slowly build up until one day you wake up and you're just completely depleted. Maybe you snap at your family or your friends. Maybe you're the type to isolate yourself. Maybe you struggle to focus or you just dread the thought of having to do all this again tomorrow. And my friend, we cannot pour from an empty cup. Neglecting our self-care means we're neglecting our relationships with others, and they will begin to suffer. When we're overloaded with work and tasks and responsibilities, our patience is low, making even small interactions seem like too much, limiting our ability to be able to connect with others. When we take the "I'm going to do it all" approach, I'm going to move from one task to the other and be just as productive as I absolutely can be, we're setting ourselves up for failure. When we're overloaded with work and tasks and responsibilities, we're no longer thinking with clarity. We struggle with decision making. Tasks take longer to complete than they should because we just don't have the right focus. And even our creativity will disappear, affecting our problem solving abilities, as well as not leaving us open to see new options and new opportunities that could lead to a better outcome. So sometimes self-care can look like setting boundaries. It doesn't mean that we're putting our needs ahead of others. It means we're bringing them up to the same level. If your friends and family and bosses are asking too much of you and too much of your time, it is 100% okay to say no and then also not feel guilty about it. When we don't incorporate self-care into our day-to-day, our lives become just something else to get through, just another day to get by. We lose our chance at joy, and spontaneity is replaced with exhaustion and obligation. Self-care is an act of self-love, and love for ourselves isn't about being perfect. It's about treating ourselves with kindness. With mindfulness, we learn to observe our thoughts without judgment. We recognize that our worth is more than just our productivity, other people's validation, what we can do for someone else, and that we are just enough as we are. We can start small with self-care. You don't have to set aside a whole day to go out to the spa. We can start with small moments throughout our day. Maybe it's just a moment to breathe, a moment to stretch your body. Maybe you're able to sit and have a nice peaceful meal in quiet or with a friend or close family. Self-care supports our overall well-being, and we can even use self-care to help train our brains to be a little bit nicer to ourselves. Sometimes we can be our own biggest bully. That's our inner critic. Think about how you view yourself sometimes, how you talk to yourself. Are you judgmental or critical of your appearance? Do you tell yourself that you can't do something before you even give it a try? Or that maybe you don't do enough? Or that you're not good enough? Maybe they won't like you. Now imagine someone talking to your best friend or a loved one or your child the way you talk to yourself sometimes. Would you want to stand up for your friend and defend them? Or would you take the critic side and just keep piling on? With mindfulness, we can turn our inner critic into our biggest cheerleader. When you start to feel that self-doubt, loathing, anger, or frustration start to set in, take a pause, take a deep breath. Ask yourself, what am I telling myself right now? Would I say this to a friend or a loved one? Instead of letting the thought take the spotlight like it's actually the truth, Recognize it for what it is, that it's just a thought. And just because we have a thought doesn't make it true. I can have the thought that giraffes come from Neptune, but that doesn't make it true. As far as we know, at this point in human history, we know that giraffes have always been a creature of planet Earth. And when we can separate our thoughts from reality, then we can begin to reframe them. And in doing so, we don't let it become a part of our identity. I'm having the thought I'm not good enough. I'm having the thought that they won't like me. I'm having the thought that I should be doing more. And then we acknowledge, this is my inner critic speaking. This is just a thought. This isn't the truth. When we're able to separate our thoughts from reality, then we can begin to reframe the thought. Instead of telling our inner critic, which is a part of us, instead of telling it it's wrong, give it direction. Give it a new task. Instead of telling yourself, of course I failed. I never do anything right. I always mess up. Switch it up to, mistakes happen. What can I learn from this? Instead of telling yourself, I'm broken, tell yourself, remind yourself, I am human and I have struggles, but I am not defined by them. Instead of telling yourself, oh, I'm struggling, I must be weak, I must be terrible at this. Remind yourself, I'm struggling, that means I'm trying, and that takes strength. Instead of telling yourself, nothing's ever going to get better, remind yourself, right now may be hard, but feelings and situations change. It is all too easy to be hard on ourselves for the things in the past, things we wish we had done or hadn't done or had done differently. But when we catch those thoughts and acknowledge them as thoughts, we can reframe them and put them to good use. In my opinion, compassionate self-forgiveness is one of the best forms of self-care we can do for ourselves. Holding on to guilt and hurt and grief and anger doesn't make us better, doesn't get us anywhere, and it just leaves us stuck. Compassionate self-forgiveness is the practice of acknowledging our imperfections with compassion instead of punishing ourselves. And we can recognize compassionate self-forgiveness in 4 steps. First, we're going to recognize, what is it that has our attention right now? What is it that our inner critic is focused on? Say it out loud or write it down. Now, as a side note, journaling through compassionate self-care practices is going to take it to a whole new level. If you haven't already, check out the video on our page where we talk about the benefits of journaling and the science behind how it works and why it works so well to impact our brains. Journaling will help you process through the emotions that come along with what our inner critic tells us. It'll give you that space to find awareness, to find healing. So, we recognize what our critic is focusing on, and we're going to say it out loud or write it down. Once we've recognized it, now, number 2, we're going to allow it. Let those feelings that come up with that thought come to full expression in your body. And by allowing it, we allow the feeling to take the space it needs in our body. Bring that anger up, that stress, that frustration, that guilt. Let it come to expression in your body. Notice if you feel it anywhere in your body, and if it feels heavy or tense or sharp or hot. Allow it to be without judgment. After you've sat with it for a moment, maybe you feel it starting to lighten up or move on, but then we're going to give it that direction we talked about earlier, and we're going to reframe it. Remind yourself that being human means having flaws, insecurities. It means we make mistakes, we struggle, we feel, we learn, we grow. And then ask yourself, if a friend were relaying this to you, that they felt this way, that they had this experience, somebody told them they weren't good enough, they weren't right. Ask yourself, what kind of advice would I give my friend? And bet you choose a more compassionate response. And that response we're going to give to ourselves. And then with your hand on your heart, you're going to say something nice to yourself. I am good enough. I am allowed to be imperfect. I forgive myself for buying into the idea that I'm not enough. I choose to move forward with kindness. Self-compassion isn't about ignoring responsibilities. It's about recognizing that you are worthy of kindness even if you fall short. When you practice speaking to yourself with kindness the way you would a loved one or a friend. Self-care becomes a natural extension of that self-love. Self-care isn't selfish. It's how we build a life that we don't need to find an escape from. By taking small, mindful steps, we prevent burnout, better our relationships, and show up more fully for ourselves and for our lives. Mindfulness helps us to recognize when that stress starts creeping in, giving us the time and space to be able to correct our course before the full burnout happens, before we reach that breaking point. Self-compassion is the reminder that we are worthy of that kindness and care, even when we feel like we don't deserve it. And self-forgiveness allows us to release the weight of past mistakes and move forward with kindness. So next time you catch yourself being overly critical, pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, would you talk to a friend this way? And choose that more gentle response. Self-care isn't about doing more. It's about choosing yourself in big ways and in small every day. Friend, if you feel like you would benefit from some help and some guidance cultivating a self-care routine that would fit your schedule and your lifestyle, please feel free to reach out. I'm always here to help. Stay present, stay kind to yourself, and have a beautiful day.